I'm here at Unidan Engineering, who is the world's finest exponent of expedition Unimogs. Is that right? Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, with Tiani, who's the business development manager, and we're going to be looking at what the Unimogs are and why you might want one as an expedition vehicle compared to some of the other options on the market. So the first question is, why would you want a Unimog? I mean, obviously, you just want one because they're just really cool, but for a practical application of full-drive touring, why would you choose one over, let's say, a caravan, a Fuso Canter, a light truck?
So Unimogs are one of the only vehicles in the world that is actually built as an off-road vehicle which can go on-road. They're still very comfortable on-road, but their main priority is off-road performance. So unlike the other vehicles where they're an on-road truck where they've gone and stuck a second axle under there as far as making it four-wheel drive, and then you have to go upgrade your suspension, upgrade everything to make it a somewhat decent four-wheel drive. The Unimog has that straight out of the box, or straight off the factory floor. So you don't have to go and change over to your coils, and obviously the portals, everything is the best it can be straight off the factory floor.
So to understand a Unimog, you've got to start with its history. And the early models were really just four-wheel tractors. Here's one of them, a square layout, so 4 identical wheels, not huge amounts of load carrying, but designed to operate farming implements and agricultural work like all of these. Now, it's also important to understand the very complex series and model naming conventions that Mercedes have. I can't explain all of it here, I can just give you some pointers. Now, all Unimogs are part of a series and they also have a model number. So for example, the series 435 has the U1700, that's the XADF ones. The U1300 is part of that as well. Then we've got the 405, which has within it examples such as the 218 and the 530. There's way more than just these examples I'm giving here. And the 437.4, which is another popular overlanding series, which includes the 5000 and the 5023. So a bit more on the models 3 to 5000 because they are popular for touring. They're all 437.4 series, but within that the 3000 is the lightest duty, then the 4000's medium duty or rather heavy duty, and the 5000 is super heavy duty. And there sometimes is in Unimog model designations a clue to the horsepower. In this case, the 2.3 is a 230 horsepower engine and the 27 is 270. Yes, they keep changing the 0. This is complex and it's not consistent. Now here is a good chart and that shows a lot of Unimog models. Here's where some of the popular ones fit in. So there's the 1300, there's the 1700, the 4000 there, the 500 over there. You can tell it's a 500 because it's got that distinctive cab, and then the 5023 over there. Now, there's two other types of ways you can designate Unimogs, and one is whether they're off-road focused or an implement carrier. Now, the off-road focus is exactly what it's designed to be. It's designed to carry a load and maximum off-road capability. So within that, you've got two generations. You've got the UHN, and that's the German translation. It essentially stands for high mobility. That was then later replaced by the UHE. So both off-road, but a slightly later version. Similarly, we've got the implement carrier over here, or tool carrier. So this is the thing which will operate snow plows, etc. Lots of power takeoffs, hydraulic, hydrostatic drive. That's what it's designed for, not so much off-road. And again, that's got a version which you can designate from N to E, also N to E here as well. So UGN, and then that was replaced by UGE. So generally for off-roading and touring, you're going to be looking at the UHN and UHE, although both are very capable vehicles. So more designations, see, it just never ends. I'm just giving you a very quick overview here. That's what a BU is, a light build series. MBU is middle build series. SBU is heavy build series. Again, a lot of this is translated from German, so the acronyms don't necessarily make sense in English. And Docker is a dual cab. And then we've just got to finish off with the Fun Mog, which isn't for overlanding. It was kind of just a snazzy version, what people might have driven back before the G-Wagon got really popular in AMG mode.
So Tiani, the Unimog, I believe, was first on the road in about 1948. I don't know if you'd want to go touring in a 1948 Unimog. So talk us through the different types of Unimog and which ones people typically set up as expedition tours.
So yeah, you're right. The early Unimogs in 1948, and then I'm looking at a 404 here, which is a 1961 model truck. Personally, in that sort of era, would not want to be driving in them. You don't have much leg room. Some people do it, but I think they're crazy. Then we'll skip, there's a million different models that they did, but we'll skip to the most common in Australia, which is the 1700. So this is the SV
That's
range.
the XADF ones, right?
Yes, yes.
So this one, I didn't recognise it at first because it's blue as opposed to camouflage, but
Yes, that's a big part of what we do here at Unidan is the restorations. So this one's a closed door restoration, but we also do full restorations as well. 1300s, 1700s, then there's 1250s, 1550s, lots of different models, but essentially they're the same thing, just different wheelbases and whatnot. The Australian Army specced them with not much at all, but that does make it a very good budget option, especially 40 years on. They're still in pretty good condition. If you're mechanically minded and don't mind checking for some oil leaks, air leaks, they're a great vehicle to go touring in, but you do have to be a bit more mechanically minded because it will just keep running and running and running until it's got something bad and it stops it in its tracks. Whereas then we go to the brand new Unimog, which is the UHE or UGE. So this one's a UHE, a 5023. So it is your extreme off-road. That's the most common in Australia that people buy, but the most common overseas is the UGE, which is your implement carrier. So
is it basically the same chassis, just a different back between the two?
No, it does have, so this is more of your torsion-free chassis,
right.
Whereas that's got more of a ladder-style truck chassis. And if you've seen the round cab on them, so they're more of an implement carrier. There's still quite a few people that are using them for international travel, specifically for the fact that they've got Vario Pilot. So your left-hand drive to right-hand drive in less than 30 seconds.
Oh, wow.
So there's lots of different benefits in the two new trucks, depending if you're wanting to go extreme or if you're wanting to do a world tour, go left-hand drive countries, right-hand drive countries, and go from there.
Okay, so if I can summarise all of that information in essentially the 1700s are really where you'd start from as a tourer. They're decided a budget option. But then if you move up to something like a 5000 series, you're going to get more capability, more everything. But it's obviously going to be newer and more expensive.
Yeah, essentially the 5023 has all of the good stuff that the 1700 has as far as capability, your main driveline features and whatnot, but everything's been modernized. So now we've got central tire inflation from the factory, we've got electronic auto shift, so it just makes everything a lot nicer, especially for long-term touring. But if budget is definitely a constraint, then the 1700 will still get you to all the same places.
Yeah, I guess one thing, if you're going to look at a 1700, you think, oh, that's cheap. But then if you start spending money, I think like air conditioning, I believe there's an overdrive for it, then you're thinking, okay, you've kind of got to add, you're getting less Unimog for your money, even if the base capability is the same. Suspension seats, I guess, are probably standard in this. But it should be interesting to do a comparison base price of a 1700 and sort of try and take it as close to a 5000 as possible and see what the difference is. Have you done that?
So I can answer that very quickly.
Excellent, please.
If we were to throw absolutely everything at a U1700, so full strip down, bare metal restoration, as you said, overdrive, working group, not including the central tire inflation, because that in itself is ridiculous on an older Unimog. We're only looking at about a saving of maybe $50,000.
Right, okay.
So it's not that much of a difference when you're looking at a 40-year-old truck versus a brand new truck.
Right, so essentially what I'm taking from that is if you're going to buy a 1700, pretty much take it as a 1700 rather than try and make it one of these, because you may as well just buy one of these in the first place, right?
Yes and no.
Kind of.
I 100% have that mentality. I think the warranty says things about it. I think the electronics are good because they're going to tell you when there's something wrong with the truck. Whereas obviously a lot of customers as well don't want electronics. They do want to just be able to drive it and not worry about computers and ECUs and that sort of thing. So I have a lot of customers that could definitely afford a brand new Unimog. but they've chosen the 1700.
But, okay, interesting.
It really just depends.
Okay, so they've chosen the 1700 because they don't want the electronics and stuff like that.
And that's just a personal preference. So
yeah.
Yes, a lot of the time it comes down to budget of if you're going to do a 1700, but then there are some customers that doesn't matter.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Really good point. So let's talk about reliability then. So people tend to say, oh, let's just go for the mechanical, I don't want any electronics, etc. And there is some justification in that. Is that really a problem with a modern Unimog though? Do people consistently get stranded out there? Are we talking Lucas Prince of Darkness stuff? Or is it a fear which is kind of overblown?
It's definitely overblown.
Yeah.
So the UHE Unimogs have been at Euro 6 since 2013.
Yeah.
So now a lot of the modern trucks in Australia are only just going over to Euro 6. So they'll have all of their teething issues now, whereas any teething issues that were there in that electronic changeover, AdBlue changeover, everything like that happened way back in 2013. So they're pretty much a bug-free system. Obviously, every now and again, it will say driver characteristics changed, check such and such. But it's more so you thinking, okay, the truck's a bit too smart for itself. I have had all my diff locks on and I've gone and done a 3-point turn.
Yeah.
And then it's going to throw an error.
But let's look at an advantage of electronic systems, which is that it can actually tell you what's going wrong.
Exactly.
Whereas the 1700, it can't. All it doesn't tell you anything. I mean, I guess this would have something you can scan, it can tell you, and even if you can't fix it yourself, you can call the 24/7 365 Unidan service hotline. No?
There's actually a Mercedes one, so I'll pass
a Mercedes one, okay. And go, hi, I've got this code, and they'll go, yeah, okay, that's what that means, as opposed to saying truck no go. I don't really know why.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
We're more than happy to help out any of our customers, whether it's a U1700 or 5023. Majority of my customers have my mobile number, so if they do find themselves in a bit of a situation, it is a lot easier if the truck's telling them what's wrong, and I can go, okay, do this, this, and this, and then rectify it. Whereas in a 1700, they're like, oh, well, the noise kind of sounds like this.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes it a bit more difficult.
So what you're saying is that the older 1700s may be purely mechanical, but they're really no more reliable than the slightly more electronic truck. And then if the electronic truck does go wrong, you've got some information about what it is, whereas not with the 1700s.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, both of them really reliable, just different.
Yeah, because you've got to remember that this is actually, as you said, designed to be off-roadable. It's not converted into an off-road truck. So you've got to expect that after, 70 years or so building Unimogs, Mercedes have learned a thing or two about them.
I hope they'd have it right by now.
So let's talk about fuel consumption and range then. When it's kitted out as an expedition tourer, what sort of range or what sort of fuel consumption can you get? What fuel tanks does it have, and what sort of range would you get?
Yep, so from the factory, it usually comes with a 145 litre tank. Obviously, that's not the case here. We have two tanks across the side here, totaling about 400 litres of usable fuel. We can also get additional fuel if we want to have under the expedition body or in all sorts of various different places. So essentially, you tell us the capacity you want and we can see if it's possible. As far as the consumption goes, typically it's between about 22 to 27 litres per 100. That's not necessarily determined by how heavy you are, but it's more so the terrain and how heavy your right foot is. When we are travelling, we don't get very much time off work, so it's always get there as fast as possible, get home as far as possible. So we're closer to that 27 litres per 100, but I have even some customers that are reporting in that early 20s.
So if you get a flat, is it possible to change the tyre by yourself?
Definitely. So with these ones on the Mercedes 20 by 10 inch rim with the internal beadlock, it's at about 160 kilos total, but you're never lifting 160 kilos yourself. So if you are picking it up from it being flat and then lifting it into this sort of position, you're really only doing about 30-40% of the actual weight of the tyre. And then no matter where we store the tyre, whether it's on the roof, in the boot of the camper, or on the back of the truck, there's always going to be a small crane or a winch to get it up into that position.
And if you get a slow leak, can you put a tyre plug in it like any normal four-wheel drive tyre?
Yeah, definitely. We also now have a new product, which is called Glue Tread. And essentially you scuff up the side of your tyre, you scuff up that pad, and then you use the glue that is provided, stick it on the sidewall, and it does everything it needs to do. And you can keep driving.
Oh, so you can actually repair sidewall
Yes.
punctures. So now underneath the Unimog, as you can probably see, the prop shaft is actually enclosed. Now in the U1700, that's pressurised. Is this pressurised?
No, it's not. So it's open to atmosphere. So that outlet is all the way up at 1.6 metres behind the cab. So we've still got our 1.2 metre fording ability. There's no compromises there. And yes, it is enclosed in the torque tube. And that's one of, I guess, the most famous things about the Unimog, and what also allows further articulation front and rear.
Okay, great. And what are these here?
So those are our park brake actuators.
Okay. And then we've also got coil springs. Now the U1700 has a coil within a coil, but there's only a single coil spring here.
Yes. So obviously, as technology changes, things increase, designs get better. We have a progressive rate spring in them. So we haven't, once again, compromised on any payload capacity. We've actually increased our payload capacity. It's just a different way of doing things.
And we've got the portal axles here. Now I've covered them already in my U1700 video, so we won't go into them here. So at the back of the vehicle, let's talk about what we've got. And I spy a winch there, 24-volt winch.
Yep, so it's a 20,000-pound Runva winch. We either use the Runva or the carbon off-road winches. That one is fitted to our rear cross member with the rear winch mount integrated. It also allows us to fit either a pintle hook here or a Heyman Reef style receiver. So we've got both a 4.5 ton or 7.5 ton ADR approved options for those. It has 9,000 kilo rated recovery points back here, as well as all of our connections for towing. So we've got our trailer safety chains, we've got our factory trailer plug, we can add in Red Arc Tow Pro, whatnot, as well as we've got our camera system at the back.
All right, so off-road vehicles will get into situations where you've got diagonal wheels in the air, and that means chassis twist, and the bigger the vehicle, the greater that chassis twist. So that's something all off-road vehicles need to handle off-road. What is the Unimog solution to chassis twist off-road?
So the Unimog solution, I guess, is not so much a solution, but it's feeding into that and allowing the chassis to actually twist. So it's a big part of how the Unimog is so capable. Yes, we've obviously got the torque tube suspension, so that helps to allow articulation. We've got the coil springs, once again, helping articulation. But a lot of the flex in the Unimog is actually the chassis, and it's designed to be like that. So with the Unimog, there is a lot of things that we need to do when we're building on the back of it to allow a torsion-free subframe. So if we're putting a tray or a camper or essentially anything that's mounted on the Unimog, it needs to be on a torsion-free subframe. Even the engine and gearbox, they are all 3-point mounted to allow the chassis to flex exactly how it needs to without ripping other components apart.
There's a unidan bull bar here, so talk to us about that.
So we've got a few different bull bar options. This is the high style bull bar specific for the 502 Unimog. We do also have a low style bull bar, which essentially just doesn't have these top hoops. And then we've got options for the old trucks or the new trucks. They are the only bars on the market that are ADR compliant. So we don't have any sharp edges pointing out the front. Everything is within millimeters of being ADR compliant. So that's a big feature that we are always wanting to achieve. It allows us to have a 20,000 pound run bar. There are some bigger winches that it can allow as well. It's got 9,000 kilo recovery, rated recovery points.
Those are the factory ones, just poking through?
So
No?
these are unidan rated recovery points.
Okay.
Yep. We have additional lighting that can be put into them. And then with the new trucks, we are repurposing the factory lighting as well. Whereas with the old trucks, we have several different lighting options for those.
So what's this compartment here?
So this is actually the factory battery box storage for the dual cabs. We quite often will completely remove that and replace it with our battery system. So you can see here, there's a whole lot of empty space around all of that and huge batteries. So we can go to smaller batteries. So a different sort of battery, which is physically smaller but has a higher output. And then that way we can relocate them and allow ourselves to put long range fuel tanks, additional storage, a much better use of this chassis space.
And also probably improve
Ground
ground clearance and ramp over as well.
Yes, definitely.
So for roof rack and cab protection, what do we got?
So we have our scrub bars, and this is our latest design. So we used to just have the scrub bars go directly down to these mounting bolts, mounting plates, which meant that every single scrub bar had to be built with the cab in-house. So now we've got these 5-axis machined feet with the heim joints in here. So it means we can now supply them internationally. Then it allows, obviously, if you're pushing through scrub, it can go up and over the truck. We then match up scrub bars on the camper body. So then that same scrub then pushes over the camper body without damaging. It also allows us to store things like our spare wheel, have additional lighting, all sorts of different things.
So wading depth in snorkels, what is the wading depth, and does it have a snorkel, and does it need one?
Yes, so we do have a snorkel just here. And then the wading depth is, as standard, it's 800. As soon as we tick that box for the extended fording depth, it changes it to 1.2 meters. So that makes our exhaust go vertical, and then it increases where our outlets for our air and everything go.
Okay, and whereabouts is 1.2 meters roughly?
Just about.
That was part 1. In part 2, we're going to look at some of the Unimog's off-road features and how to drive it.